welcome to Stretford Paddock. We're here for the paper talk this morning. Happy Monday, everyone. Monday, the 18th of May, 2020. How are you all doing at home? Oh, it's been another weekend, hasn't it? We've gone and done another weekend. Look at us, eh? We're getting through it. And if today's news is to be believed, only around 3 or 4 more weekends to go, which is very exciting indeed. How are you all doing this morning? Morning, Damien. Morning, Lee. Right, we've got some big news today. A couple of bits of big news, actually. Raul Jimenez has been linked with Manchester United, and we are finally, like I said, getting towards an official return date for the Premier League, and that is probably going to be coming in and amongst a meeting that is going on right now. So we'll be refreshing and checking throughout the video to make sure that no news has come out about that, but we can say what is expected to happen. These things with these meetings it happens in politics and stuff all the time, and in football as well, where it's like, we're having a meeting today to check on when football should be coming back, but it is expected to be announced. Everything's expected to be announced. We already know what's going on. What's the point in this meeting? It is expected to be announced that football will return on the 19th of June. But again, we'll get into the full details of that because it might not be the 19th. We'll get into that very, very shortly. Let's get into our first story of the day then, and that, like I said, is Manchester United's interest in Raul Jimenez, Wolves' main man up front, or one of the main men. They've got a few good players these days, haven't they? They've got Jota, they've got Jimenez, they've got the midfield fellas, Moutinho and Neves, that kind of thing. But Jimenez is undoubtedly their goal scorer, their main striker up front. And this is coming from all sorts. This is coming from, I'm reporting this from Duncan Castle's writing for The Times, but it has been reported sort of across the board, sort of almost out of nowhere, really. It's the last couple of days, there's a couple of rumours on Friday. It seemed a little bit kind of, short-sighted a little bit. Let's just get a story, so I left it. It does seem to have sort of kept cropping up a day ago, and Duncan Castle's been the sort of crescendo, if you will, of rumour here. So this is saying Manchester United face competition from Juventus to sign Raul Jimenez. The Serie A champions are understood to have joined United about inquiring about the availability of the Mexico international once the transfer window reopens. Both clubs want to take advantage of a depressed market to improve their options at centre forward. Wolverhampton Wanderers are open to selling Jimenez, who has scored 26 goals in 67 Premier League appearances since joining from Benfica in 2018. A substantial profit, this is the sticking point potentially, a substantial profit. Wolves paid £34 million to convert the Mexican single season loan into a deal with a full transfer 10 months later. With leading scorer Marcus Rashford preferring to play on the wing, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's first full campaign as Man United's manager has been handicapped by operating with just one experienced centre forward, Anthony Martial, and on January deadline day, United turned to the loan market to take Odion Ighalo from Shanghai Shenhua. The Nigeria international is due to return to his Chinese Super League employers at the end of June. Now, here's something that's interesting, because it's quite a key point to all of this. So first of all, 34 million they paid, and they want a substantial profit on that. Right, so what's substantial? 15 million, 20 million plus? 10 million isn't a substantial profit, is it? And do you think, well, maybe, 45 million, 50, 60 million for this guy? He's a great player. How old is he, 24? No, he's 29. And I'm sure some of you knew that. But Raul Jimenez, to me, I thought he came over to Wolves as a sort of 22, 23-year-old who was, making his first big move in Europe. I know obviously he came from Benfica, but to a top league. I didn't realise he was 29. He's the age Alexis Sanchez was when we signed him. So I don't know why his age isn't mentioned in this article, because generally speaking, one of the sort of the first pillars in any good transfer article is the player's age, because that plays such a huge part in any sort of transfer fee. So age and length left on contract are the two sort of stalwarts in any usual transfer story. So his age isn't mentioned in this article, but he's 29 years old. So if they're looking for a substantial profit on 34 million, you're looking at least 55, 60 million. What do you think? Let me know what you think to that. The idea of potentially paying 55, 60 million quid for a 29-year-old who has got a decent scoring record, but he's not, let's face it, he's probably not going to improve. I'm not saying that he couldn't have a slightly better goal-to-game ratio than that, but as a player, he's 29 years old. He's pretty much set as he is. He's not got much potential left to fulfil. He's probably got, as a striker, 2, maybe 3 years at the top left. Yeah, Lee Davis says 29. I did not know that. Yeah, he seems like one of those players who, because he's just sort of a big, strong lad in that kind of Lukaku mould where you kind of think, well, he's probably looked like that since he was about 15. You know, he's just got the sort of heavy jaw, big, muscly guy. You think he could be 22 easy. He hasn't got that kind of like an old feel to him. He's strong and he's aggressive and he's quick and he's a bit of a bulldozer, isn't he? As well as, you know, he's good on the ball as well, but I'm not trying to make too much comment on his quality, but I just mean to look at him, you would never know that, you know, he's been playing top flight football for, you know, 13 years. 30 odd million, not more than that for him, and I'm in if Igalo doesn't sign. Well, I think a lot of people, 35 to 40 million, you know, kind of makes a bit of sense, doesn't he? He's an excellent player. I would say one of the sort of handful of better strikers in the league, to be honest. Obviously, below that, you know, Aguero, kind of world-class potentially level. I think he's just in below that. So I think he's an excellent player, but, you know, 50. If they're looking for a big improvement on the 40 million they paid for him or 35 million they paid for him, it does seem a lot of money for a player of his age. Too old. I'd rather we kept playing Greenwood and kept Igalo. If we need to buy a striker, Haaland would be my first choice. Well, the Igalo thing seems to be off, doesn't it? Again, who knows? But the recent rumours and the recent talk around the Igalo situation is that he won't be extending his contract any longer because of the £20 million fee that Shanghai wanted for him, which seemed a bit more plausible when he was in scoring goals and the market hadn't slumped or presumably slumped. We don't really know, do we? Everyone's talking about this depressed market. And the transfer window hasn't opened yet. And of course, these predictions can happen, and we know from the fact that a lot of teams are making less money this year simply from TV revenue that, you know, the odds of this market carrying on going up the way it has been seem very limited. But we don't know for sure, you know, who's got what money and how much people will spend. Someone said Joe Haaland is the same price. Is he? Is he though? Because we don't know. Again, why do we know that Haaland's the same price? Do we know what his buyout clause is? Also, I don't think they're going to sell Haaland this summer, will they? They only signed him a few months ago, so I doubt that Dortmund would sell Haaland and Sancho this summer, if not neither of them. Mark says, how old are you, Joe? 26. 3 years younger than Jimenez. I've got 3 years left in my legs that he doesn't have. Surely we can get a Igalo for a lot cheaper than that. Well, we can, but you know, let's face it, as sort of surprising as Igalo's been, he's not the same level as Raul Jimenez as a striker. You know, 29 goals in 67 games, just under a goal every other game, not quite, but in and around that mark, which is, you know, better than any of the strikers we've got at United at the moment. Jimenez as record there, so it's excellent. He supposedly has a £60 million buyout clause for next summer, which is why we didn't get him. I assume you're talking about Haaland there. Again, we know that you know, Dortmund are willing to sell Haaland on at some point. That's how they make their money. But can we afford to wait? Can we afford to go into another season? We've seen it this season when Rashford or Martial or both have been injured, that United really struggle. And as good as Greenwood has been, he's been kind of covering up the holes we've got at right wing. So if we don't get Sancho because we can't afford anyone, we don't get another striker, all of a sudden you're 1 or 2 injuries away from being almost as bad or worse off than we were this season. So I think we are in desperate need of a striker, to be honest. 26 and a beard like that. People don't start getting beards at 40. It's not like Gandalf. If you've got a beard, you can probably grow it by the time you're about 23. Raiola will move Haaland on ASAP. Yeah, I'm sure Raiola and Haaland are looking for a move at some point. But again, if it's not this summer, what we're going to do, because we need a striker this summer, I would say. Heard anything about Ghana going on loan? I haven't. There were rumours in the season, when the season was going on, about a few teams from the lower leagues that Ghana may be going on to, but it never materialised, so I'm not quite sure why it didn't or whether it will going forward. But I guess United are open to a loan, and certainly were open to a loan a few months ago. Right, let's move on to our second story then. And this one got a little bit more definite fact to it, and this is that Project Restart meeting is taking place, presumably right now, to discuss the exact details on when and how the Premier League will restart. We've got articles from Simon Stone talking about this. We've got an article from The Telegraph and Jason Burt talking about this as well. I'll read the start of that article and then I'll move on to the Simon Stone article. Premier League clubs to give go-ahead to Project Restart with 5-week plan for resumption on June the 19th. Players expect to return to training on Tuesday, tomorrow, with decision on neutral venues possible later this week. Premier League clubs are on Monday expected to give the go-ahead on a crucial first stage of Project Restart, with players returning to training on Tuesday as part of a 5-week plan for the competition to resume on June the 19th. In what could be a defining week for the Premier League, another vote may be held as early as Friday on whether neutral venues will be used and what the clubs want to do if the season has to be curtailed. Friday's date is not set, it depends on what happens on Monday, but there is a desire to accelerate the decisions being made to try to save the season, especially now the German Bundesliga has restarted. Again, that was the Telegraph. In the BBC, Simon Stone is saying a very similar thing. The Premier League clubs hope to give their players the go-ahead to return to training in small groups this week, but there's a feeling that the intended June 12th date for matches to start again will need to be pushed back. So that's where we're looking at this potential June 19th restart date, which is just under 5 weeks. So it would have been 5 weeks on Friday, if you know what I mean. So it's 4.5 weeks from now. A vote is due to take place on training and medical protocols when the 20 top flight clubs hold their meeting on Monday morning. Again, so that must be taking place or has taken place as we speak, but there's no current reports or updates on that. That would be conditioned on the condition that they observe social distancing rules and adhere to a series of strict criteria, include getting changed at home and driving to training grounds on their own. It's just, you just sort of think, it's a token gesture, isn't it? If it even is going to work like that. Fair enough, driving in cars together, I kind of get it. You know, but all the players are going to be touching each other. What is this? How can you pretend? Who is being fooled by the suggestion that social distancing measures will be observed at training? Who is being fooled by this? We saw it yesterday and on Saturday. This famous picture, which will probably go down in history, of Haaland celebrating with all of his teammates, you know, set apart from him, all distanced from him, not touching each other, celebrating a goal. Who are we fooling here? They were in the dressing room together. They're at corners with their arms all over each other. They're in the wall, stood next to each other, touching arms to each other. What? I understand that everything needs to be done to make players as safe as possible and for things to be done properly and to at least give a visual facade that we are trying to do things that aren't just for money here, because that's all it is, let's be honest. We'll get to that in a minute. But how on earth do you think people are being fooled by this idea that social distancing will be observed in training and during celebrations? We see them touching each other for the rest of the game. I just can't. It has that feel of it feels like we're being tricked or we're being lied to a little bit. No, don't worry, they won't touch each other. There'll be social distancing. Just like, do you know how you lot are being told to go back to work? Yeah. Well, us footballers, we're just like you, really. Or it's not even the footballers saying it, it's the league saying it. We're just like you. we just don't really want to come back, but we've got to reopen the country, haven't we? So we'll observe social distancing. Or you're going to put 2-metre lines grids on the pitch so no one can go next to each other. It just is absolutely ludicrous, and it honestly, it winds me up. This idea that we're meant to believe that they're doing the best they can here. They're doing the best they can. Well, why is the FA Cup getting scrapped then? If it's just about money, or if it's not about money, it's just about the integrity of the game, it's just about reopening the country, bringing football back. You know, not all the tournaments are being played. And you're prioritising the ones that make more money. Honestly, if you're going to test people, and they haven't got it, then they can touch each other. If you're not going to test people, pretending that they're staying apart, what are you going to do? So in a warm-up, everyone's 2 metres away. When you're tackling, everyone's 2 metres away. You're not going to pick up the same ball. The water bottles are all going to be staggered 2 metres across the edge of the pitch and not in a little caddy, are they? The balls are not going to go back in the same bag that one bloke's touching. It's just stupid and insulting, honestly. Anyway, that's all. But it's something to look forward to, isn't it? And presumably, this Bundesliga being back, as they've mentioned there, will soften what has up to now been a bit of a choppy feedback in terms of what you're doing with all these assets, these PPE, these tests? Couldn't they be going to someone else? Couldn't be, and there's all sorts of problems with that. First of all, you think, you know what? Why are the Premier League players taking up what would be probably 2,000 to 5,000 tests over the course of the rest of the Premier League when they could be going to people who really need it? You think that. Then second of all, you think, well, does that mean that there are tests available that the government just aren't buying and aren't using? And if so, you know, what I would hope, and you would think that there is certainly no way that the Premier League would be taking from the same pool as the NHS to the point where the NHS have got less tests to access. I would assume that there are probably more tests available than the government are willing to buy for the NHS, and therefore, you know, it's like the NHS are shopping at Tesco and the Premier League are shopping at Sainsbury's. It's like, well, just because you've bought all of them doesn't mean that we were going to buy them anyway. So you would hope at least that they aren't taking from the same, you know, shared resource pool as the NHS and as the government, and that people who need them can't get them because the Premier League have taken them, because that is utterly unacceptable on any level. But, you know, as we've seen from the way the government's handled it, there is access to these things that are available that we are choosing or refusing not to give to people. So I don't necessarily trust that the Premier League are taking them away from the government. And again, if they are, then there's simply no way we can allow that. But I think the fact that the Bundesliga is back, the fact that we've kind of got our heads around, well, the Germans are really good at stuff, give it a month, we'll be like, let's come back now. Forget all that sort of moral stuff. They're back, we need to be back. There's that sort of fear of missing out type mentality that's going to come into all this that seems to have crept in just after one weekend of Bundesliga, let alone a month. But we'll have to see. Premier League will buy their own tests, of course. Yeah, I know that there are plenty of sections of society that are in much more desperate need of tests than the Premier League, but it's up to the government and to the people that fund those industries to get those tests to them. It's hard to say, isn't it? Because there's no real moral ground you can take where these tests are more important for the footballers. But I think it's the people that buy those tests for the people that need them need to do a better job of doing it, rather than, you know, again, blaming the Premier League for presumably not taking from the same pool, because if they are doing that, like I said, that is utterly unacceptable, but I'm guessing that isn't the case. This is how to properly live. Signs. I don't know what that is. I think it's the same throughout the society as a whole. Social distancing measures put in place will be for show to try and get people to resume life. It's like the lifting guide you get at work. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is how you lift. Lift with your legs, not with your back. Sign that, you've read it now. If your back goes, we're not going to give you any insurance. Yeah, it does feel as though, let's get the country reopened, when really what it means is we're losing money here. So let's risk some people, because, you know, at some point, you know, the government, we're going to look bad when the stock exchange and all that sort of stuff crashes for 10 years. And if we get people back now, we might have recovered in 6 years. There is building works going on upstairs, but that sounded like Godzilla. Anyway, is that moaning Myrtle in the background? No, there's drills, there's saws, there's hammers. Do you remember for those who've been watching for a while, you remember what was essentially a 12-month program to just hit the ceiling of this office that we're in? Well, that has restarted. Operation Banghead seemingly has restarted in the office above us. I don't know what they're doing. I've never known any sort of building work to take this long on any scale, but again, it seems as though they've resumed, but we can work through that. Roy Hodgson probably isn't happy about the Premier League restarting. Yeah, there's people in at-risk groups here, isn't there? The Premier League is a big organisation. They will know what they're doing. I like to think that those two things correlate, but as we've seen from the way Amazon's dealt with this, as we've seen from the way plenty of big organisations treat their workers in terms of healthcare, in terms of insurance, in terms of payment structures, in terms of you give them your holiday days as sick days, what Amazon was doing at the start. So just because someone's a big organisation does not mean they have any kind of moral compass, or that they will handle anything in a way that common sense or fairness or kindness would dictate. So as much as I think they're a big corporation, they'll be all right, you can't always assume that. Yeah, if the Premier League takes tests from the NHS or other countries, then it would be unethical for the Premier League to resume, of course. And if that is what's happening, then it can't come back. but you would have to assume, and you would like to think that that can't be the case, because that is so ludicrously evil that surely no one would be proposing that. I think what it may do actually is highlight the government's lack of willingness to supply these tests that are, if the Premier League can buy 3,000, if Joe Rogan can have one for all of his guests, and not trying to blame him, but there are private citizens and companies that have more than enough access to these tests when we need them. So why can't the government have access to them as well? And they keep, again, let's not get into talks about the government, but again, you would hope that the Premier League are doing things the right way. Anyway, that's going to be all from me today. Bloody hell, it got a bit political at the end there, didn't it? But the talks are coming out. We're looking at a June the 19th restart date for the Premier League. The meeting is going on at the moment, but again, it's all meetings these days are expected to announce. We already know what's happening before it comes out because leaks and rumours, and this is going to happen. The main story that will be coming up, which does seem to have some genuine contention to it and some possibility of kind of multiple different outcomes here, is whether the games will be played at neutral grounds, because as far as I'm aware, there are at least 7 teams in the Premier League that absolutely don't want that to happen, which is, almost half. So that'll be an interesting one to find out, and we'll get that news to you hopefully by Friday. Again, they've said there that the meeting on that depends on this meeting today, but we kind of know what's going to happen in this meeting today, so we can assume that meeting on Friday to discuss neutral grounds, to discuss exactly what will be going on when the Premier League comes back, will be coming out on Friday. But we'll have loads more news and stuff before then, obviously. This afternoon, we've got Housen's Brew. Stephen will be joining you for that at 4 o'clock, so make sure you check that one out. Thank you very much for joining me at home, everyone. Hopefully you have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time.